Hello, Carmen Molitor with the Pinnacle Team at RE/MAX Properties.
And Amy Cavender with eMortgage Capital and Assumption Solutions.
We're back with more information about assumable loans. Today we're going to talk about, a very specific thing. Can a non-veteran assume a VA loan, or is it only veterans that can assume a VA loan?
That's a great question. Generally speaking, VA loans are assumable to anybody, regardless if they have entitlement and have been in the military before. However, your seller may not want to allow a non-veteran to assume that loan. The reason on that is there is what's called entitlement or eligibility that is used to guarantee the lender against default. Okay, that's the specific reason that there is, entitlement or eligibility. That is tied to the house until that loan is paid off. However, if you've got a non-veteran coming in, it's not substituted. So that seller would be leaving that portion on that loan.
And I heard that as the new owner buys down that rate, that it frees up some of that equivalent of eligibility. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Okay, I'm glad we asked.
That is not correct. No, the entitlement portion is determined at the time the loan closes. Okay, so let's just say that it's $96,000.
Mm-hmm.
That remains $96,000 from day one to the day they pay that loan off. Okay, so that does not
they
change.
either have to refinance out of that, which who would do that?
Right.
Because a lot of these loans that are being assumed are in the 2 to 3% rate for their mortgage interest.
Correct.
Or until they sell the house.
Correct. Or if they have a veteran buyer coming in, we can just make sure that that veteran buyer has sufficient entitlement to do the substitution. What that does is basically swaps out that $96,000 from the seller and puts the buyer's entitlement on there. They do have to have the full $96,000 for the substitution.
Yeah.
They can't have $95,500 and ooh, that's good enough or close enough.
Pay the extra in
Correct.
cash. That's
They
not allowed.
can't.
I've had
It's
that
all-
question asked too.
Yeah, it's all or nothing on that. So if that veteran buyer wants to come in and substitute it, then that's a great way to do it too. So to answer the initial question, yes, a non-veteran can assume a VA loan.
Perfect. And it's a little bit more complicated than people think, which is why they should call you for help, because not only do they have to have the entitlement to buy the house, but they have to have the time, as we've talked about, to wait for all of this to be completed, and every lender's
Correct.
a little bit different with that.
Correct.
And then sometimes we run into glitches. Like we had a listing and that we had a VA assumable loan, and we had buyers that were VA, but they didn't have enough entitlement. They were short by about $100,000. And so what they ended up, because it was tied up in a different house that they had had been using as a rental property, so in order to make it work, they actually refinanced out of that VA loan in that property they had somewhere else
To free up their entitlement.
to free up their entitlement, and then they were able to have enough of the entitlement to actually assume the loan of our sellers.
And
So,
I would say
but it
that's
took a while.
it
Yeah.
does, yeah. But I would say that that's one of the biggest misconceptions with these is because loan officers were trained to think that, well, if they don't have sufficient entitlement, they can go ahead and just pay down
Right.
that loan to come up with the difference, and that's totally different. That's
It's not allowed.
That's okay on a new mortgage, but on an assumption, that is not allowed. It's all or nothing. Okay.
And if the seller were to allow for a non-veteran to assume the loan and that new buyer defaults, then that entitlement goes away forever. Is that correct?
Correct. That
Okay.
portion. So that doesn't mean that the seller can't go by and use a VA loan again, but that substitution
That
or that
$96,000 that we're talking
correct
about
that
is gone
portion
forever.
that has guaranteed that loan is gone.
Yep.
They
So-
can always pay it back,
Oh, interesting.
but
Yeah.
depending on the amount, it might not make sense. You might just
Yeah.
want to consider that a loss. The other thing that we wanted to talk about too is how long that substitution takes after closing. So that does take, it's not immediate like on a new loan. If you hand me a closing disclosure showing that that loan was paid off, I can call VA and get that reinstated right away. On an assumption, it can take up to 75 days. So that servicer that handles the assumption, they have 45 days to send their loan package to release the liability for the seller and then also do that substitution of entitlement. And then once VA receives that package, they have 30 days to complete those two tasks. Although VA, you can rush a little bit on that, the servicers not so much.
Yeah.
So
it might be worth the wait and the hassle of having to move twice and rent in the interim to be able to secure a loan with that type of rate.
correct.
But it's not something that you should plan on being a quick process. You know, we're
Correct.
all used to a typical 30-day close, and sometimes that can happen, but you shouldn't plan on it.
Not very often.
Yeah.
60 to 90 days is more of the average of how long these assumptions are taken.
As always, thank you so much,
Thank
Amy.
you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you for your business, your support, and your referrals.